Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you guys are watching this. I'm Ryan over at Magnum Sports. If you guys aren't familiar with what we're doing, we're actually sitting down and asking questions regarding gun legislation to a number of people. And today I got Ethan with me, who's a student at a university here in Michigan. And I kind of want to get his side of things as well, pertaining to the gun laws that are kind of being looked at and pushed forward. So with that being said, we know that Governor Whitmer a couple weeks back did like the State of the Union address, and she really capitalized on protecting loved ones at home, and she had a couple different proposals for that. And I don't know if it's an educated decision, an uneducated decision. What are your thoughts on some of the proposals that you heard of?
I honestly think a lot of it's kind of emotional.
Sure.
You know, there's a reason like why a lot of these issues come up when after a tragedy happens, and then it seems to kind of fade away until something else pops up. You know what I mean? Yep. So I do largely think it's emotional, and I'm not gonna like say there's like no logical, like there's no logic behind it, but yeah, I do think it's mostly like an emotional concern for many people.
So I completely agree with the emotion side of things, and to have empathy and to look at it from that perspective, like I can see why some of these laws are being introduced. I don't agree with them at all.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the laws in general here shortly, but basically when we make emotional decisions, they tend to impede with our rights as Americans. And that's scary and dangerous. And it almost feels like mass punishment. Yeah. Like you got a bunch of responsible gun owners out there, and now you're just trying to restrict them even more in what they're doing. So, so for you guys at home, the three big things that she spoke about in the State of the Union, or the State of the State, excuse me, is what they call it. The first one was red flag laws. Then she mentioned safe storage and universal background checks. Now, she did not go into detail about any of these. So, you know, we just can look at other states and what they're doing and kind of draw a conclusion in the direction she's trying to go based on what other states have currently done. So the first one we'll tackle is the red flag law. Do you have any concerns with the red flag law?
Definitely.
What concerns are those?
So in general, I don't believe you can or like you should essentially punish people because they might do something. It's just very arbitrary. Like this might be a stretch, but I could almost see it kind of turn into like a Salem witch trial kind of situation. Yeah. Like, because I believe like your neighbors, like people who know you, not even any law enforcement like personnel, like your neighbors and people who know you can essentially go to the government, go to law enforcement, and be like, hey, I think this guy it might be an issue, and I know like he has a couple rifles and a handgun or whatever. Yep. And then that person could get their weapons taken away, and I do kind of feel like it skips due process as well. So yeah, and to elaborate on the laws that we see in other states a little bit further, basically what happens, and according to what I've read on the state of Michigan and the red flag law they're proposing, is that a close friend, family, a doctor, and that includes psychologists, therapists, things of that nature, or law enforcement would have the right to ask a judge to remove your firearms based on friends and family saying you may be suicidal or something's off or something doesn't seem right. Same with law enforcement and doctors. I mean, do we take away somebody's car before they get a DUI? Right. You know, and we can apply this to so many other laws out there, and that's kind of what we're doing. We're like, okay, well, he hasn't committed a crime, but there's a possibility. Well, there's always a possibility that somebody's going to do something perfectly
awful.
Sane person could just flip a switch and just cause a lot of mayhem.
Yeah, and is a gun the problem? You take away the gun, you still have a rope. You know, they could take their own life in that fashion. Or if you take away the gun, they still have a knife or a hammer. When we look statistically, like knives and hammers are extremely dangerous weapons that people use to kill people with every single day. So I agree with you 100% in the fact that due process is not being done in this case. It's just like, hey, let's slap your wrist before you even get there. Right. And who's to say what a friend is today versus an acquaintance? Right. So that's super dangerous too. or somebody reaches out and sees you at a certain networking event or something like that, and they're like, ooh, I don't like him.
Exactly.
You know, I met him. I consider him a friend. Does he consider me a friend? Maybe, but let's report him and get his crap taken away.
Right.
And that plays into the whole political game, too, where you got a bunch of left people that just don't want nobody to have a gun. Who's to say that these people aren't going to run around and be like, he shouldn't have a gun, he shouldn't have a gun, he shouldn't have a gun. And they're asking the judge for all these favors, if you will.
Right.
So, yeah, the red flag law feels definitely like a stretch and an overreach of the government once
Yeah, I agree.
So, the second law she talked about was safe storage. What is safe storage? Is it probably a good question?
It's extremely subjective.
Yeah, it really is. So a concealed carry holder will tell you, well, safe storage is when the gun's in my holster on my belt. That's safe. The gun is ready to be carried, ready to carry out its duties. Somebody else who maybe shoots a gun once every 2 years, once every year, they probably have a nice safe in the house where the gun's locked up.
Yeah.
And some of the answers we've got for safe storage are pretty sad. We talk about trigger locks, and you know, most of these individuals proposing these laws have never been in a stressful environment that usually involves a firearm. But what they don't realize is the first thing you lose is all the blood to your fingers and your toes, and when you're trying to put a small key that's about that big in a small lock in an emergency situation, you're asking for trouble.
Yep.
There are solutions out there, but they're actually pretty expensive, and not all of them work the same. So I guess it's really tentative on what is safe storage. Like, do we have a good answer for that?
Well, that's your home, you know, like your home, your family, your kids, like that's for you as like the man of the house or woman of the house for that matter, to decide like what is safe storage for me and my family.
Yeah.
You know? Like so many people are taught like, you know, in like NRA like classes and things like that, like guns and ammo should be stored separately. Like I completely disagree.
Sure.
Like if the guns and ammo are stored separately, or like you have all these trigger locks and all these things, it's like you're more of a gun owner. You're not really an armed citizen at that point. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Boy, for the government to dictate, and it depends on how far they go with this, right? If they're saying, hey, it's inside your house, like those are your four walls, right? But those laws are already in place. Like if my kid got a hold of one of my firearms, I would be held liable for that.
Yep.
So what are they doing by going even a step further, saying, hey, if you have a gun inside the house, it has to be in a locked container? It's like, well, I'm preparing for worst case scenario in my house. Like I need to access that firearm relatively quickly at a given point.
I don't really know how they would enforce that either. Like unless like someone like a law enforcement entity has like a search warrant for your house, and then you're probably already in some kind of trouble anyways. There's really no reason for like any law enforcement personnel or the ATF or whatever to be coming in your house and be like, oh, you don't have a trigger lock on this, or this cabinet's not locked.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Hey, this clearly did not come out of one of the approved safes by, you know, this person, or this person. Yeah, I think when you start reaching inside people's homes, boy, we're walking a real dangerous territory here. Just because, like, I mean, they pay for the home. They pay the taxes on the property. Yep. It is their home inherently. How is the U.S. government allowed to walk inside your house and tell you what you can and cannot do inside those four walls? Like, granted, violent actions, sure. Like, they shouldn't be allowed, and cops can be called for those. But we're talking about an object that you purchased inside your home. Like, there's a lot going on here that needs to kind of be unpacked, I think, before we hear it go a whole lot further. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So the last law that they've been talking about is universal background checks. So this one's kind of tough. Basically, the law, what they're getting at is any individual obtaining a firearm at any given point has to get a background check done. Okay. Currently, in a lot of different states, including Michigan, currently, if I wanted to hand a hunting rifle that meant a lot to me over to my son when he turns 18, it's as easy as going, here, son, I would love for you to have this, right? What they're trying to enforce is my son and myself going to a gun shop, paying another fee to have a 4473 done on my son and say, hey, or not even the 4473, I don't think is going to be required, but the NICS background check at a minimum, and say, hey, in order for this gun to be your gun, we have to go ahead and make sure we do a background check. And do I see a problem with that? I do. Now, I don't live like most people.
Yep.
So that's different, right? Like, we live on a farm. I mean, we have everything that we need right at home, and we work the land, and we do all those things. And we use firearms a lot of the time, and the majority of the time, to hunt. Mm-hmm. And those guns mean a lot, not just to me, but to my son, my daughters.
A lot of sentimental value.
Yeah, there's a ton in it. And why we have to take that extra measure to go ahead and make sure that individual is safe. Well, if anybody knows that individual, it should be dad, right? Not always the case. I understand, like, a lot of parents are disconnected from the kids. Maybe that's a bigger issue we should be talking about.
That's
right?
kind of where personal responsibility comes in. Like, the government can't come in and just solve all your issues.
Yeah.
You know, like, you gotta, just gotta be an adult, you know, sometimes. And, like, granted, I'm young, you know, I don't have any kids, I don't have a family, so maybe that's really easy for me to say.
Sure.
But, like, I don't know, like, government can't hold your hand with everything. Like, you gotta be in charge, you know, of your family.
And I think here's the biggest issue between gun owners, non-gun owners, which typically line up right, left, red, blue, right? Yep. One thing we can bear in mind is, like, where do we go and why aren't we giving you anything is because you tend to reach even further every single time.
Yep.
Right? Like,
it's very slippery
we are very like, stand up and fight for our guns, and there's a reason for that because we see it in everything we do. We give you an inch and you take a mile, right? And you're never content or happy with what you get. It's just one more. Okay, we got that one knocked out. We need to do another one. We need to do another one. So that causes some major conflict amongst gun owners, non-gun owners, right, left, red, blue, all these different things. That's a huge talking point. And if we can't come to some agreement, like, boy, this is gonna be an ongoing thing. It's almost a battle in itself, right? Like, it's never gonna end.
Like, the whole point, like, at least like from what I see of the Second Amendment, it's kind of be a disconnect from the government. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, like, it's there, like, to protect your life and liberty, whether it's from, you know, some ass on the street or, like, you know, like a foreign invasion. I know, tinfoil hat, whatever, or like your own government, you know, because I mean, it's historically proven, like, governments tend to kill their own people eventually. Yep. So.
And we've seen it here in America, right? You know, we're a young country in all aspects, but we've ended up in wars fought right here on this land between our own people and our own people, and it's over smaller disagreements than a lot of the disagreements we're having today. Yep. So it's interesting to see exactly how much people take. And
I mean, just look at the civil unrest back in 2020.
Exactly.
People were getting yanked out of their cars just trying to go to work or come home. You know?
Yep. So we're in a funny place. You guys, I appreciate, Ethan, first of all, you coming out. It's been great, and it's a short video. We just wanted to touch base and let you guys know exactly what legislation's kind of being talked about, kind of pushed forward, so on and so forth. We want you guys to be self-thinkers. We want you guys to have empathy for the other side as well, so please do your homework and really try to understand their point of view and try to educate them on your point of view as well. I think it's super important we have these conversations. If you guys would, hit the like and subscribe button. We don't normally ask in our videos, but we're getting to that point to where we have quite a few people following and listening, and we would love for you guys to be one of them as well. As always, shoot straight, have fun, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you guys at Magnum Sports.